just to say a little bit about the Pilgrim Vow and the Renunciate Order. It was very sweet last night. We watched the movie The Song of Bernadette, which is about the life of Saint Bernadette, who was a young girl in France who there were many miracles associated with, and the most famous, of course, being the creation of a healing spring at Lourdes. Lourdes. Lourdes is the French? Lourdes, okay. And so she... yeah, I know. It's sort of like a little knowledge is a dangerous thing because you feel like it's spelled Lourdes, so it must be like Le Roi, but no, it's Lourdes. So, oh well. People have gone there and been healed, and it's a very sacred place, and it was something that was brought forth by her hand. And yet, when you see the movie, and you see her life, it seems that the greatest miracle of her life was just her own purity, her own presence, which is amazing when you think it's not a film of the saint. It was in the mid 1800s, 1863 or so on was when this was really in its heyday, when she was a young girl, 17 or something like that, and. It was the actress who was able to just channel that divine consciousness, or at least inspire it in all of us. And so someone said to me afterwards, "So where do you find all these great movies?" And I basically said, "You don't. I mean, there really aren't any. You can count them on about 3 fingers. It's just, there really are very few that are like this. This was a movie that Master saw and loved." But the reason I bring it up is because in Renunciation, in fact, Bernadette becomes a nun. She became a nun. And so she lived in a convent with other nuns and lived for God. And we sort of say, okay, well, that's fine. That's being a renunciate. But so much the emphasis on renunciation, as Swamiji points out in this book, A Renunciate Order for the New Age, is on what we give up, what we let go of, and what we don't do. And it kind of leaves you wondering with all this don't do this and don't do that and don't have this and don't have that and don't even think that, what you're left supposed to do. And in fact, if you're giving all these things up, what do you get out of the bargain? And so what's interesting is that there is a line in the book, and I'm restraining from the temptation of giving the Wednesday night class, which was 3 nights and 2 hours each, all over again. But at a certain point, I'm going to have to say, just read the book, because there's a lot to be said and understood. The funny thing about it is that one thing I wasn't able to communicate, I felt, was Swamiji was saying this renunciate order is ego renouncing and samadhi affirming. This is what this renunciate order. Does that sound familiar to you, or appealing, or attractive? I should think so, if you are a disciple, or a kriyaban, or a devotee, because this is what every devotee is saying anyway. I want God. I like my ego. Oh, my ego is a problem? Well, I like God more. So if my ego is the obstacle, forget it. I want the best thing. Why is it hard to give up the ego? It shouldn't be. It's sort of like choosing between Pavakai or Jangri. How many people do you find going, well, let's see here, let me try to do a taste comparison? No, I know Pavakai is good for sugar, and Jangri is too, in a different way, good for increasing it. So it's just not a hard competition. But yet we hold on to this Pavakai this whole time, just going, no, I can't give it up. And God is saying, Pavakai matum. Doesn't make any sense at all. So the thing is, there's a line in that book that how can we take a vow sincerely, really? How can we promise to do all these things when we don't know the future? How can we make a promise when we don't know if we're going to break it? Again, it's not as if God shows us the entire roadmap. We check it. Okay, I can do that. Okay, I can do that. I can do fine. I mean, you know the vow in advance. It's not that the people who have prepared were saying, here's the vow. Here, get ready. You should have thought of that before you came. No, it's not. It's not. You know the vow in advance, but you don't know your life in advance. And Swamiji writes this in the book, that he raises the question, how can we in all sincerity, the discipleship vow the same, the Kriya vow the same, how can we make this promise when we don't know what lies ahead? And remember, a vow is a promise to God, a promise spoken before God, a promise that also asks and invites God's blessing. It's a bigger deal if you break your word in that way. Master said so. Not something to live in fear of, but meaning not something to take lightly. He said to some monks who were pressuring him against his hint, don't pressure me. They were saying, give us the vows of monkhood. This was in Master's time. I don't quite understand, because they already were monks, but maybe they wanted final vows or a specific vow, I'm not sure. Master was resisting, and finally he relented and said, fine, I will. But he said, but this is on your head, not mine. He said, some of you will fall, and it will be harder on you because you took this vow. Why harder? Because you're breaking a promise. And if you don't make the promise, you can't break it. And he was hinting to them, you're not ready yet to make that promise. It's not a question of worthy or pure enough or whatever, it's just ready. Maybe they were seeking it for the wrong reasons. I don't know anything about them and who they were. Sometimes people seek it, as Master said, for glamour. Their first question about the renunciate order is, what color can I wear? And how will that color look to others? You wear a color for one person, yourself, not for anyone else. It is not a status or anything like that. That's what Master was saying. People come for glamour, the glamour of the spiritual path. And so I don't say that to you all, but just to say, he even said it of people taking Kriya. He said some people came just for the ceremony. And he said, that's why I've discarded giving Kriya for a long time. Imagine it. You could have a chance to have Kriya from Master. And we think what we would give for that now. But in his own days, people, sometimes they took these things lightly. There he was. Oh, Kriya, sure. One man was overheard coming out of the Kriya initiation, and he said to the other, what did you pray for? And the one said, I can't remember what the first one was, that something like, I can't remember, but something like I prayed for a raise in my salary. That was the prayer at the Kriya initiation. And the other said, why would you pray for something like that? I mean, this is your initiation. This is a really big opportunity. He said, well, what did you pray for? He said, I prayed for something serious. I prayed for a new house. And so you just kind of, I don't think it was because Master didn't make it clear. Master never made something unclear. Master is the clearest of all, but we only receive according to our own receptivity, our own understanding, our own preparedness. This grows. Remember that.
We do go through a purification process.
Yeah, we do go through a purification process. One of my earliest conversations with her, I said, I feel like a lifetime member of Ananda. I had been there all of, a few months. And I just feel like a lifetime member. And when I would say that to people, they would go, oh. And I said that to her, and she said, and you will be tested. And then I thought, I like her. Because I thought, yes, that's exactly right. And she was willing to tell me. And so we get clarity through this testing and purification. But coming back to this line in the book, Master says, why make this climb? He likens the vow to setting out on climbing a mountain. And he said, how can we commit to climbing a mountain when we don't know all of the obstacles that will be in our path? We don't know if we will come to some yawning abyss that we won't be able to cross. We don't know if we'll end up losing heart and turning back. And so how can we really proceed without knowing the whole journey and everything that will come up along the way? And he says, for the renunciate, the only alternative to the climb is death itself. And when you say that to a group, you find some people going, huh? And you find some people going, yes. And that's just sort of how it is. There are those who say, absolutely, that's how I feel. And other people who say, Enasolinga. Death? Yen? Is there any other option? I mean, death? I mean, you could climb or not climb. You could climb or watch TV. You could climb or a lot of other things you could do, but climb. And the renunciate says yes, and that would be death itself. And so I have a hard time explaining that. I have a hard time communicating if someone says, why death itself? I say, but isn't it obvious? And so that was what was so beautiful about the Song of Bernadette. She was so in love with Divine Mother. She was in such ecstasy. She was being persecuted and harassed, and you could see that what she had received was so joyful, so all-fulfilling, so purifying, that she was able to go along with all these tests. She had this way of kind of maneuvering through them also. It wasn't that she just sort of endured beatings. She very cleverly was able to answer people, but not from an inherent cleverness, but from a purity and a divine wisdom and an intuition. But you could see what she got out of it. She was with God. And that made her completely unafraid, and also made her relatively uninterested in anything else. But there's a touching scene in there where she's also very humble and not at all aware of herself as anything at all, and saying, I'm not particularly special. They said, they were interrogating her, how can you see the lady who appears but no one else can see them? You know, and you could be tempted to say, well, you know, I mean, as Babaji said to Sri Yukteswar, your gaze is not yet faultless. You could say, well, their gaze is perhaps lacking a certain something that is not lacked by my gaze. She didn't say anything. Bernadette said, I don't see why they can't. She's there. It was, and that's another subtle thing too. It was about the Divine Mother. It wasn't about her. The person was asking, why do you see it? Sorry, I didn't mean to point at you. I don't like to point at people, because once in the class I said, you know, sometimes people, you can direct energy through your finger. Like if you point at someone, and I did that at someone just as a demonstration, and the person went, ah! And so I said, no, not you. So we have to be careful. But so Bernadette was not focused on herself. She said she's there, the Divine Mother's there, the lady, she called her, is there. And you could see how everything else that people were saying was just not attractive to her. But she did say, as she was getting older, because there was a young man in the village who was very charming and very nice. They had a good friendship forming, and it sort of looked like it was going in a certain direction. And she was seeking a job. Her family had been very poor, and all of the children, everybody was working. As soon as they could get old enough, they would get a job somewhere. And she wanted to be a maid in someone's home. And the priest of her village said, right now the commission is meeting to determine basically whether you are a saint or not. And do you know what that means? And she just said, they've asked me a lot of questions and all these things, but she just, wasn't thinking about that. Like, well, what are my chances? What do you think? It's completely beyond her. I say that because sometimes the thought in different ways occurs to us. But when you really are in that, you're just not thinking that way. She said she was thinking about getting this job as a maid. And then the priest said yes, and Anton is a very nice young man. And he said, but can you really live that life? If you are determined to be the one who saw this blessed vision of God and then brought forth this healing spring, can you then go on as a maid and basically get married and have a family of your own in that way? That was a different time when renunciation had to be very much, a hard line had to be drawn. Now, as Swamiji has opened up this order to married people and so on, people with children, and so that's a difference. But just to say that she had that regret that she had to give up those worldly dreams, but for the sake of God, she said, I'll do it all. It's right. But what I loved about that movie is you could see what she got out of the bargain. You could see why it was worth it to climb that mountain, because there was nothing left in the valley. It wasn't a rejection of that. It was just, this is so much better. And again, that some people choose renunciation for that too. Someone came up to Master and said, or I think it was Master, and he said, or else Sri Yukteswar, and he said, my wife has left me, I've lost my job also, and my whole family has abandoned me, so I'm going to renounce the world. And Master said, you haven't renounced the world has renounced you. And someone told me, I was actually quite shocked, a friend of mine from Chennai, who was a classmate of mine at MIT, said, there sometimes these sadhus walking around, and I heard the word sadhu. I thought, oh, sadhu. Oh. I just love that word. And he said, yeah, basically you become a sadhu if you can't do anything else. And I was horrified to hear this. I thought, you've got to be kidding. I came to find that, sometimes, in some cases, he was right. And so that's the thing. This is a personal thing between you and God. And so this is deepening our connection to God. But remember, everyone here is a renunciate. A renunciate is someone who seeks to find happiness in God and not in the world. And every devotee has already made that choice. That's what it means to be a devotee, a truth seeker. It doesn't mean we overlook the world completely. Once we do that, we're in God. So we're doing it by degree. But we have already said, I know there's more fun with God than there is in just Pavakai. One day I think the Pavakai farm growers are going to come here and chase me out, because I'm always trashing Pavakai. I actually like Pavakai, just so you know. I do like it. Not beets, so that's why I don't even mention them. But the... so...
I do not like Pavakai, so let's not have tons of dishes of Pavakai.
And she likes beets. So if you have any beets... In fact, this is a very deep and spiritual story. We were in a South Indian restaurant, and they liked us, and we liked them. And they had a habit of bringing us dessert, that just complimentary dessert. Here you go, we brought you a little sweet. At first I thought it was because it was the only dessert that was on the menu, that was available, because I would say, I would like Faluda. Faluda is not available. I would like Kofi. Kofi is not available today. And I'd never had this experience before. This was in California, mind you. And so it's not available. Well, why is it on the menu? It has not come today. So, okay, so then,
We would go about once a week to this restaurant and have dosa, and little did we know that
what we were summoning. Yeah.
these guys were very nice. However, they came, immigrants come to the U.S. for different reasons. Sometimes they're professional, sometimes they go so they can accumulate money and send them home. So these guys were the type, they came in groups, they would all live in one apartment. They would make American money, and then they would send it home. And they would do this until their parents said, it's time to get married and come back home. So we made friends with these guys. They were really nice guys. And so
So
anyway,
again,
that's
this is...
why
Yeah.
we
So every now, there was this one guy who I had a hard time understanding, where he would say, would you like the masala dosa or the plain dosa? But what I heard was, and I would say, yes, because I just wouldn't know what he said. So then he said, oh, today I will bring you a very special sweet. It is bitrutalva. And I said, bitrutalva? Wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. And I just said, great. And so she said, I think I understand him. I think he said beetroot halva. And I said, no, he couldn't have said that because no one would ever create such a horrid thing. And she just said, you're in for it, because she knew the political problem that, here it was, beetroot halva, thank you so much, it's free, and I can't just say, oh no, Vaindam. And so he came, with this, and plopped it right down before me, and thank you so much. And so then I tried to sneak it, you can eat it, but he had brought one for her also, and so anyway, I just thought, that's fine, everything is God. And remember, Master ate the putrid rice, and this was worse than that. But, he saw God in it, and so he could eat it, and so I was thinking of that. Anyway, I don't even remember what happened.
He gets physically ill from beets, so you must have gotten ill later.
I think when he wasn't looking, I ran out the door. I'm not sure exactly how it ended.
He might have had a Russian past life where all they had, the poor Russian farmers, when they were having problems, they would grow beets. And so they would make beet soup, beet this, beet that. So we think maybe he went through an incarnation where all he had could do was eat beets. And so that's why he feels ill at beets.
I tried to be tough. I was sitting at the expanding light. We will get back to the renunciate order in just a moment. This is what I have renounced, is beets. So I was sitting at the expanding light, and whenever they would have beets, I would sort of, stay away from even that particular thing and all this. And because you know how they are. They leak onto everything and turn it all red. And so I was sitting there eating, and I heard someone saying, oh, I love beets. And just like thinking if I could move to another table. And they said, I used to work at a beet factory. And there would be these conveyor belts with beets, and we would see the beets, we'd be all covered in purple, and the beets would drop from the sky, and I started thinking, you know what, this is ridiculous. I am going to eat these beets. This is stupid. I don't want to be bound by likes and dislikes, and I know I have a dislike, so I'm going to overcome this. And so I got some beets and I ate them, and I just had to keep my mind very strongly here as I was eating them, and withdrew all the energy from the tongue, and just eating, fine. It's fine. I like them. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to be bound by this weakness anymore. And then I got a stomach ache, like she said. It was like the body on a fundamental level was just rejecting it. And my stomach wasn't tasting them, which was the only objection I have to them. And so, anyway, I realized it must just be something fundamental. So, returning now from this is that when someone takes a sacred step in their life towards choosing God, it's a beautiful thing. And so Swamiji's creation of this renunciate order includes everyone. It's very, very sweet. And it came from, this pilgrim vow was created in India. Because when he said we're going to have this renunciate order ceremony, someone said, well, I would like to take a vow. And he said, well, you have young children, and so you can't really just renounce them. But I want to take a vow. There's a vow happening. I want to take a vow. There's a ceremony. We're saying something to God. I want to be a part of it, Swamiji. And so he wrote this pilgrim vow as something to include everyone in. And of course it's true, because it's about finding God. Above all, what we're seeking is inner renunciation. Renunciation in our hearts, in our minds. Which means, again, I affirm samadhi, and I let go of my ego. I choose God over this world. I know that that's the only thing that will make me happy. So, for those of you who have prepared for the ceremony, if you could please come forward.